Steven Weinberg, the American physicist, said this: with or without religion, good people can behave well, and bad people can do evil. But for good people to do evil, that takes religion. Tonight we are continuing, in fact, we're bringing the last part of our series we've been doing on Sunday nights called Why Bother with God? Just nudge someone next to you and say, why bother with God? Why bother with God? What we've been doing is exploring some of the most common questions and objections that people have to faith in Jesus. And so we've talked about why does God let bad things happen? We've talked about why is God against my sexual freedom? We've talked about just why bother with God? Like, life's pretty good, so why would I even bother with faith? And tonight, I want to address the question, aren't we better off without religion? Now, before we dive into this, it probably helps if we define religion so that we're all dealing in the same terms. It'll be up on the screen behind me. We're going to define religion as this. It's a belief in God and living in obedience or adherence to that belief and the characteristics, attitudes, and practices required as set forth by God. So that's our question. Aren't we really just better off without religion? I mean, individually. You and I as individuals, surely we don't need religion in order to be good people. In fact, maybe it's religion that actually stifles our individuality. And then not just as individuals, but corporately as people groups. Isn't believing in God and living according to those beliefs just causing a whole lot of damage in the world today? You know, it's very common for people to believe that Christianity is not just irrational. Who knows, a lot of people think you're just dumb for believing in Christianity. Maybe people just think I'm dumb. Maybe that hasn't happened to you. A lot of people think to be a Christian, like, you're an idiot. Who would believe in God? Some believe Christianity is irrational, but there is a growing sentiment in our culture that Christianity is not just irrational, rather it's a force for evil. Far from being a good thing, it's believed that religion is opposed to individual flourishing, it's opposed to civil peace, and it is anti-human progress. If you don't believe me, read some comments in social media threads. Read the comments in the Australian newspaper in the comments section. Anyone else like me? You're like, I'm just here for the comments. And you just read the comments because there's just, so you get your popcorn out. But who knows, the majority of comments, if religion is lobbed up as a topic in media, the majority of the comments are implying either subtly or not subtly at all that we would be far better off just if we did away with religion altogether. Christopher Hitchens, the famed atheist, he said this: we keep on being told that religion, whatever its imperfections, at least instills morality. But on every side, there's conclusive evidence that the contrary is the case, and that faith causes people to be more mean, more selfish, and perhaps above all, more stupid. I mean, look around. I'm joking. I'm just making sure you're awake tonight. And Hitchens is not alone in this view. In fact, this sentiment has been expressed by a lot of people in the anti-religion camp who've concluded that, you know what, the problem with religion is religion poisons everything. Well, tonight I want to ask, is that actually accurate? And is religion really a source of evil, bigotry, hatred, divisiveness, and violence? And if yes, wouldn't we be better off without it? But if no, okay, what place does religion hold? In 2017, there was a survey done which polled residents of 20 different nations, including Australia. And one of the questions was this: do you agree with the statement, religion does more harm than good? Did you know that 63% of Australians agreed, yes, religion does more harm than good? Now, I'm not sure if that survey was done at a Greens party meeting, but the stats are pretty high. You know, many people say, well, of course religion has done more harm than good. Look at all the wars and the violence caused by religion. Look at the abuses and the cover-ups in the church. Look at the exclusion that minority groups experience at the hands of the church. And so this survey actually seems to support census data in which there's a growing number of millennials and people in the Gen Z demographic who are answering the question about faith and religion by indicating no religious affiliation. That group in our culture is being called the nuns, not N-U-N-S, N-O-N-E-S. It's literally being termed the rise of the nuns, people who have just got no affiliation with religion and no interest in it at all. I guess entertainment kind of reinforces this idea that religion is a type of archaic poison. Take, for instance, the Netflix series, The Handmaid's Tale, which I'm going to assume you haven't seen, and I would warn you against watching. The Handmaid's Tale imagines a dystopian world run by a fundamentalist pseudo-Christian sect called the Sons of Jacob. And it's all of this type of entertainment that reinforces the idea that religion just leads to fundamentalism, which only serves to drag us all back into a dark era of superstition and control. And so in the next 30 minutes, I want to share 4, I guess, common reasons that people give for why we would be better off without religion. And for each one of those, I want to consider the merit of that reasoning, and then whether or not it's reason enough for us to reject belief in God. Does that make sense? You know how there's some sermons that are pretty light, and there'll be a couple of funny stories, and then John 3:16 at the end, and we'll all feel good. This is probably not one of those sermons, all right? You're going to have to turn your brain on tonight, all right? Has everyone got your brain on in church? Great. Number 1, many people say, well, we would be better off without religion because religion causes violence. Well, of course it does. I mean, just a brief glimpse at history and 10 minutes of the evening news proves the point. There's 9/11. That was religiously motivated. There's all the suicide bombings. Most of them seem religiously motivated. There's terror attacks. There's the endless squabbling in Palestine, which seems to be religiously motivated. Not to mention, a look through history at the Crusades, the Spanish Inquisition, the Protestant Catholic wars in Ireland, slavery, all carried out by Christians and all carried out in the name of their God. And so doesn't it seem obvious that religion is the common link between these atrocities? So what should we do? Well, let's just do away with religion. After all, obviously religion has the power to turn otherwise good people into radicals. Therefore, if we get rid of religion, I'm really on it tonight. If we get rid of religion, well then we would step into this peaceful age of reason or reason. Well, it sounds reasonable. It kind of makes for a compelling tweet. And you think, yeah, that's right. There is so much religious violence. Imagine if we just got rid of religion, then we would all just sing Kumbaya and it would be peaceful on planet Earth. The only problem with that is where that idea has been tried out, didn't really work out very well. If you look at not the last 2,000 years, but if you just look at the last 100 years of human history, and you look at the societies in particular that have celebrated freedom from religion, well, we actually have a pretty illustrious highlight list. Dinesh D'Souza, in his book, What's So Great About Christianity, he sums it up this way. It'll be on the screen. He says, in the past 100 years or so, the most powerful atheist regimes, atheist means without faith, without religion, atheist regimes have been communist Russia, communist China, and Nazi Germany. And they've wiped out people in astronomical numbers. Stalin in Russia was responsible for around 20 million deaths produced through mass slayings, forced labor camps, show trials followed by firing squads, population relocation and starvation, and so on. Then if you're to look at Mao Zedong's communist China, that regime is considered to be perhaps the most murderous regime in human history. D'Souza goes on to say, Stalin and Mao's killings, that is Russia and China, unlike those of, say, the religious crusades or the 30-year war, their atrocities were done in peacetime and were performed on their fellow countrymen. Hitler comes in a distant third with around 10 million murders, 6 million of them Jews. Then consider Pol Pot, who was the leader of the Khmer Rouge, the Communist Party faction that ruled Cambodia from 1975 to 1979. Within this 4-year period, Pol Pot and his revolutionary ideologues engaged in systematic mass relocations and killings that eliminated approximately 1/5 of the Cambodian population and estimated 1.5 million to 2 million people. And so focusing on only the big three, Stalin, Hitler, and Mao, we have to recognize that atheist regimes have, in a single century, murdered more than 100 million people. But yeah, religion's the problem. You know the song Imagine by John Lennon? Anyone heard that song? Can we sing it together? Imagine. Oh, we need someone to lead this out. Come on, Mark Tabacru. Imagine all the... Whenever that song comes on, everyone's like, oh, imagine. It's just so peaceful, and everyone gets all hippie and zen. Well, let's actually look at the lyrics and then compare it to reality. Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us, above us, only sky. Imagine all the people just living for today. Hey, imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. Imagine all the people with no religion just living life in peace. Well, Pol Pot, Stalin, and Mao Zedong all didn't just imagine it, they did it. They did no religion, and 100 million people died. And so the problem with John, sorry to just really jump in the deep end, but sometimes you have to debunk nonsense that gets thrown around on social media. The problem with no religion producing peace is where it's been tried, it's produced the exact opposite. Why? Because what happens when you get rid of the idea of any higher moral authority? Well, he who has the most guns rules. And if there's no ultimate accountability, if there is no moral transcendent code, then whoever rules on this earth rules, and there really is no cosmic justice, there really is no one that I'm answerable to. So can you see how by removing any idea of God or divinity or higher authority, you don't get a more peaceful civilization, you get a civilization that is ruled by terror in the end, because whoever has the most guns wins. Now, am I saying that every atheist is evil and violent? I'm not saying that at all. I'm simply saying that it's not so simple as to say religion equals violence, therefore non-religion equals non-violence. That just doesn't stack up in history. The Australian historian, John Dixon, in his book Bullies and Saints, he writes this: no historically informed believer can deny that Christians have participated in all that is worst in human history. But Christianity has not been a special contributor to evil. Egypt, Greece, Rome, Gaul, Saxony, and England hardly needed the church to learn violence. All of these societies were doing just fine on the war front and the slave front before the church came along. In every part of the world, in every century, there have been divisions and bloody conflicts over land, honor, resources, revenge, and ideologies. And so the point is this: violence is not inherent within religion. Violence is inherent within humans. And so the point is not, well, we've got to do away with religion, because it turns out even in the most irreligious societies, violence has been outworked. The other point we've got to consider regarding Christianity and violence is the teaching and the example of Jesus. Yes, Christians have committed acts of violence, but you have to ask, have these actions aligned with the teaching and the example of Jesus? Or are they actually in contradiction to the teaching and the example of Jesus? And so when you look at the life of Jesus in the Gospels, his life, his example, his teaching, you don't get any hint of or inspiration toward violence toward our opponents or people who don't believe the same way that we do. Jesus taught us to love our enemies, not kill them. Jesus taught us to turn the other cheek and to work justice for the afflicted. Jesus at the cross forgave those who crucified him. When Peter pulled out the sword, Jesus told him to put away the sword. Incidentally, Muhammad had names for his swords, but I digress. Jesus was very different to any other religious leader, and Jesus didn't promote violence. Rather, Jesus promoted forgiveness and mercy even to those who persecuted him. So, it turns out that where violence has been done in the name of Christianity, it has been in no way inspired by or motivated by the teaching or the life of Jesus. And so you simply can't draw a straight line from the atrocities of some religious people and the teaching of Jesus. Wherever people have done violence in Jesus' name, they've done it in opposition to the example of Jesus, not in accordance to the teaching of Jesus. Does that make sense? Number two is this. Some people say, well, we'd be better off without religion because religion causes division and intolerance. You Christians, you're a bunch of bigots. The thinking goes that the problem with religion and its exclusive truth claims is that what religion does is religion tends to divide people up and then create a sense of superiors and inferiors. Religion has a way of saying these are the believers and these are the infidels. These are the righteous and these are the wicked. These are the insiders and these are the outsiders. These are the elect and these are the outcasts. These are the Queenslanders, these are the Victorians. And so religion has this way of dividing people up, and religion is just also divisive and intolerant. Why can't we all just be one? So many people say, wouldn't the world just be more inclusive and more cohesive and more tolerant if we just dropped all the religious divisions? Alistair McGrath, he says this: the simplistic belief that the elimination of religion would lead to the ending of violence, social tension, and discrimination is actually sociologically naive. Now, he doesn't mince his words either. The point is this: all humans tend toward tribalism, don't they? All humans tend towards that. People like to hang out in tribes. If you don't believe me, go to the Sunshine Plaza and watch people. You get people in tribes that tend to hang out together. Notice they all, because they all want to be individuals, they all dress the same, look the same, talk the same, listen to the same music, and these people don't generally hang with those people. And who knows, religion has nothing to do with it. It's just tribalism. People tend to be tribal. Well, people tend to find ways of defining who's in and who's out. And we actually all do it on a daily basis. And it's not just religious people who do it. We all tend to be tribal by nature. What's quite ironic is a number of the new atheists, as they're called, Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, and co., they refer to those who have pushed away religion and embraced their secular worldview. They refer to themselves as the Brights. I mean, what a meek and self-effacing title to give yourself. They refer to themselves as the Brights. And of course, the inference being that if you don't believe what they believe, well, clearly you are not bright. And it's a very humble title to take on. Can you see how even those who say the problem with religion is it divides people up, then they themselves divide people up? In fact, have you noticed that many of the supposedly most tolerant and inclusive groups in Australian society today are the same groups who are the quickest to cancel and deplatform those people who don't share their particular views? And so again, we can see that tribalism and division and intolerance is not a religious thing. In fact, it's just a human thing. And so if it's just a human thing, well, then we should ask the next question, which is the logical question. If all humans, religious and irreligious, tend to be tribal by nature, then we should ask which worldview or which belief system has within it the resource to bestow value and dignity on those people who disagree with us and who don't see eye to eye with me. And so I really believe that Christianity provides the most firm basis for respecting people of other belief systems. You see, Christianity teaches that even if you believe completely differently to me, even if you hate me and hate God and curse the name of Jesus, you know what Christianity teaches? That you're still made in the image of God, and therefore still worthy of respect. Christianity teaches in 2 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 15 that he, Jesus, died for all. Everyone say it with me? All. Christ died for all. And so what that would mean is you might hate me and you might hate my religion and you might hate this church, and yet I look at you and I don't see someone who is lesser than me. I see someone that Jesus shed his blood for. And so I see someone who, you know what, Christ died not just for the Christians, not just for the moral ones, Christ died for all. And so whether you're Buddhist, Sikh, Christian, Brisbane Lions supporter, no matter what you are, who knows? Who knows, no matter what creed you subscribe to, no matter what your sexual preferences are, no matter how young or old you are, no matter what race you belong to, who knows, Christ died for all. Which means this: All humans are tribal, but it's within the Christian worldview that you've got the resource and the framework to look at people who disagree with you and say, you know what, we might disagree on things, but I respect you. And I believe you're made in the image of God. And I believe that Jesus died for you just as much as he died for me. And I believe that you could be accepted by God by the same grace by which I was accepted by God. And so can you see how this idea that religion divides people and causes us to be intolerant, it may be true of some other worldviews, but you can't actually say that it's true of the Christian faith, because the Christian faith gives us the resource to give value, dignity, and honor to every person, no matter what they believe in or do. Does that help anyone tonight? Number 3 is this. People say we would be better off without religion because religious people are like this. They haven't contributed anything of real value to society. I love it when people say that because it's really just betraying their ignorance of history. The thinking goes that, throughout history has been surging forward, but the only thing dragging human progress back all along has been religion. And if we could just cut off the dead weight of religion, then humanity could really move forward. And it's this idea that throughout history, it's the church and it's been people of faith who have sought to suppress the progress of technology, science, medicine, and society at large. People say, you're religious, you're like a Neanderthal. You're trying to get us all back into the Stone Ages. Many authors have actually been really successful at convincing millions of people, even some Christians, that faith and religion has been the bane of history. Steven Pinker, he says this: religions have given us stonings, witch burnings, crusades, inquisitions, jihads, fatwas, suicide bombers, and abortion clinic gunmen. Therefore, the problem with religion is it always drags us backward. Well, this thinking is actually just really a willful blindness of history. Because over the last couple of thousand years, some of the brightest minds and some of the leaders in innovation were people who not only believed in God, but whose work was motivated by a desire to reflect and honor the God of the Bible. In fact, many of the things that we take for granted in Western culture are actually the legacy of the teaching of Jesus and the work of the church. Universal human rights have not always been a thing. Who knows now, people love to talk about human rights, like everything is a human right. High-speed internet is a human right. Boost juice for all is a human right. Free this, free that's a human right. We love to talk about human rights. Not every nation and culture on the planet believes in human rights like we do. Where did this idea of human rights come from? It wasn't from the Greco-Roman culture, which treated some people as just slaves and second class. Who knows? It came from somewhere. I'll tell you where it came from. It came from a Christian worldview that says everyone is made in the image of God and everyone is an individual for which Christ died. Therefore, every human being should have inalienable rights regardless of their status in society or their gender or their ethnicity. What about education and healthcare for all? We take it as a given. That you should be able to just go to a hospital, and whether you're rich or poor, you should get equal access to healthcare. That hasn't always been a given. The first people to ever start hospitals were Christians, motivated by their faith in Jesus, because Jesus looked at the sick and the infirm, and he didn't cast them off. He didn't say, well, you must have done something bad and that's why you are the way you are. God must be punishing you. He didn't do that. No, he healed them. He gave them his touch and he gave them dignity. And so it was Christians motivated by Jesus who started hospitals. The Braille system. Now there's some people who are nodding like I don't know, but I'm nodding because the majority of people in the room are nodding. For people who are blind and they can't obviously read, the Braille system was actually invented by a Christian pastor called Louis Braille, so that those people who couldn't see and couldn't read, so that they could still hear the gospel by Braille. It was motivated by a man who just wanted people to know how much Jesus loved them, and so he invented the Braille system to give dignity on people who otherwise didn't hear the gospel. Did you know in India, the word for school in parts of India, for an educational institution, that word literally means the building next to the church. because it was when Christians came with the message of the gospel that says every person should have access to education. Why did Christians want people to get educated? Again, we take literacy as like, well, of course everyone would be literate. That's not always been the way in history. You know what the big push for literacy around the planet was? Christians who wanted people to be able to read the word of God so that they would know how much Jesus loved them and they would know the plan of redemption. I want us to see tonight that these things that we take for granted didn't just appear in a vacuum. They haven't just always been there. And they weren't invented by Facebook or Twitter. They were invented by people motivated by a love and a grace of Jesus and looking to elevate the condition of their fellow man. Modern science was birthed out of a Christian worldview. Nonviolent resistance. Where did people get that idea? Jesus on the cross, who was not violent towards his enemies. Limited government, the idea that government shouldn't control us and own us, and there should be limits on government. Where does that come from? Not from Dawkins, that comes from Jesus, who said, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and render unto God what is God's. Moral values such as humility. Humility was never a cultural value until Jesus came along. Who knows, we all agree that humility is something we should aspire to. That's why sports people who are even totally up themselves, they try to act humble after a game. Have you noticed that? Oh, no, yeah, I played a pretty good team. It was about the team. It was about the team. Because even if you up yourself, in our culture, we recognize you got to at least pretend to be humble. Where did that come from? It didn't come from first century Rome. It came from Jesus, who, though he was God, humbled himself upon the cross. And so Jesus turned cultural values on their head. And so the point is this: these things haven't been present for all of human history, nor have they flourished in every culture. But these values that we take for granted actually grew in the soil of Christianity. John Dixon says this: violence has always been part of the human story. The demand to love one's enemies has not. Division has been a norm. Inherent human dignity has not. Armies, greed, and the politics of power have been constants in history, but hospitals, schools, and charity for all have not. The point is this: the Christian message made a difference. And many of the things that we think are just normal in society haven't always been the norm. They were actually produced because of the life, the teaching, and the influence of Jesus. Number 4, the last one is this, as the band come back. Everyone staying with me? Number 4 is this. I might make this quick because I'm pretty hungry. Number 4 is this: we would be better off without religion, many believe, because religion actually suppresses individual human flourishing. You know, the typical stereotype is that a religious person is going to be dour and sullen and solemn and miserable and judgmental and morose, because the typical stereotype is that religion is a type of straitjacket, and religion will suppress who you truly are. And if you really want to find who you truly are, you need to throw off the straitjacket of religion so that you can really express yourself and do away with the old ancient commands and rules. You know, as I read the biographies of Jesus, they're called the Gospels, the more I find that when someone had an encounter or a conversation with Jesus, they inevitably ended up becoming a more truer version of themselves and reaching their full potential afterwards. In John 10, verse 10, Jesus said, and it's quoted often, he said, "I have come that they might have religion." Jesus didn't say that. He said, "I have come that they might have life and have it more abundantly." The Harvard School of Public Health professor Tyler Vanderweel and a journalist, John Sinif, wrote an op-ed entitled "Religion May Be a Miracle Drug." Check this out. When they did an observation and a study of religious people, they found this: if one could conceive of a single elixir to improve the physical and mental health of millions of Americans at no personal cost, what value would society place on it? The point is this, that when they surveyed demographics and populations, they found that people who had a genuine faith in God and who engaged in religious practices like coming to church were typically found to have physical and mental health benefits that were different to people who didn't participate in religion. It was found that people who go to church regularly have lower mortality rates, higher optimism, lower rates of depression, less likelihood of committing suicide, greater sense of purpose in life, less likely to divorce, and more self-controlled. And so it turns out, well, doesn't religion poison everything? Well, apparently not. Apparently, there's a stereotype out there that religion puts you in a straitjacket and ruins everything and makes your life miserable. But when they actually surveyed real people, they found that, depression rates went down, suicide rates went down, there was more optimism and hope. Well, of course there was. Because what is this universe if there is no God? All we are is just cosmic accidents that somehow, by chance, managed to, by an evolutionary freak, become people. And then we got to cut, shave, and blow dry and graduated from being Neanderthals to being human beings, and we stood upright, and now we've got, 80, 90 years on this planet to, hopefully accumulate a little bit of stuff and have a few people like us, and then we go back to the dirt and kind of that's it. And so, of course, religion and the understanding of God, who brings value, purpose, dignity, meaning, hope, of course that would result in more positive outcomes in our life. Now, look at some of you are thinking, yeah, but look at what Bernard Shaw, the skeptic, said. He said this, yeah, but the fact that a believer is happier than a skeptic is no more to the point than the fact that a drunk person is happier than a sober one. That made me laugh, but who knows, Bernard Shaw, he fails to acknowledge that there's a difference. Yes, believers and drunks are both happy. But you don't generally find that drunk people are more self-controlled and more likely to care for others and more deeply engaged with their work and more likely to be healthy and live long and more likely to stay married than, who knows, you can't just say, well, drunk people and Christians, they're all happy because, they're all not thinking straight. No, the outcomes of a Christian life tend to be much more positive. And so here's the thing, perhaps there is something to this faith deal. Perhaps faith in God actually does speak to a part of you and I that no amount of popularity or pleasure or status or stuff can fulfill. Because what if you and I are not just physical creatures eking out a physical existence on a lonely planet? What if we actually are made in the image of God? What if there actually is a spiritual realm? That would probably imply that you and I are spiritual creatures. That, yes, there's a physical part of who I am, which can be satisfied with physical things, but there must also be a spiritual part of who I am, which can only be satisfied with spiritual things. And that would make sense of why some of the people in Hollywood who tick all the boxes of having all the things that I'm supposed to have are the most miserable, dysfunctional people on the planet. How does that work? It's because you and I are made in the image of God. We're made with a spiritual vacuum inside of us, and we are created for relationship with Him. And so, how do you conclude this? You could say this, yes, some terrible things have happened in the name of religion. And let me just say this, if you're here tonight and you have been hurt through religion, can I just assure you that what took place was in no way the heart of Jesus toward you. If you look at the Gospels, Jesus' sternest criticisms were for religious people who looked the part on the outside, but who mistreated people by virtue of their religious power. And so if you're here tonight and you've been hurt in church or hurt in a religious environment, can I just say, that's not God's heart toward you. If you want to know God's heart toward you, look at the cross where Jesus died. But many of us, because hurt brings confusion and throws us off balance, we can start to think that what happened to us or what happened to someone that we love actually is reflective of the heart and the nature of God. Let me just close with this example. Imagine that you break into my house. Let's personalize it. Imagine that Tom breaks into my house. I don't know why I chose you, Tom, but imagine that Tom breaks into my house and he steals my clothes. So he gets my jacket, he gets my shoes, he gets my jeans, and then he gets my car keys. He also gets my cap. And so then Tom, wearing all of my clothes, driving my car, just goes on a crime spree across the Sunshine Coast. I don't think this is prophetic, but I was hanging out with Corey Turner for a few days. I'm mucking around. He goes on this crime spree, and he goes and he break in and enters, and he steals stuff from some restaurants, and he holds up a bank teller, and he just goes on a spree. This is hypothetical, guys, all right? Just go with me. Tom goes on an absolute spree. And then 2 days later, I'm sitting at home with Sarah, just trying to get some clothes on the Iconic, and there's a knock at the door, and the officer comes to my door, says, Dustan Bell, you're under arrest. I say, what do you mean? I say, well, there's been multiple reports of someone wearing your clothes, driving your car, and they've broken into restaurants, they've stolen money, and you're under arrest. Who knows, I would be appalled because I didn't do that. And they say, well, he matched your description. He was wearing your jacket, wearing your jeans, wearing your hat, driving your car. Therefore, you're under, who knows, I would rightly be appalled because just because he was wearing my clothes doesn't mean he was representing what I would do. You know what, there's many people who have worn the jacket or the clothes of religion and have outworked a whole lot of harm in people's lives. And sometimes in the pain and the confusion, we associate that and think, well, that must be Jesus. You know, Jesus has been falsely accused for many things. He was falsely accused on the cross and he still gets falsely accused today. And can I just help some people tonight? Just because it happened in the name of God doesn't mean it represents the heart of God. Someone might have been wearing his jacket really poorly. And so if you want to know the heart of God towards you, just look at the cross. Where Jesus stretched out his arms, he was nailed to a cross. Though he was innocent, he was hurt by religious people, mind you. And he took the punishment that our sin deserved so you and I could know peace, forgiveness, identity, hope, all because of what Jesus has done for us.